Good afternoon, and welcome to another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal discussion about Star Trek. And our focus today, since we've been doing this as a series, is Star Trek The Next Generation's episode Symbiosis. And I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, the Doctor. Hello, Doctor.
Hello.
I don't think you... Oh, you know what? I should move my microphone.
Do I need to move this?
I'm going to move mine like just a little closer to me. I'm going to do
Okay.
one of these things. That way I don't have to yell or anything like that. What is that? How does that sound? Sounds good, right?
That sounds fine.
Oh, you said... Whoa.
Oh, was should I not do this?
I don't know if you want all the ladies in the audience to get riled up. You should do that, but otherwise it's fun.
Is that tea Earl Grey?
Tea, Earl Grey hot. Actually, was it Captain Janeway that drank coffee?
I wouldn't know anything about that show.
Well, I'm having coffee.
Apple juice.
Audience, you'll have to mind the noise. Something's going on upstairs in stellar cartography. They're banging on things up there, so every now and then I'm sure you'll hear that in the background. And then, of course, if Khan is loose in the city, you'll hear sirens. So, jumping right into the kind of the episode summary, it's pretty straightforward and simple episode. Symbiosis is about two worlds that rely on each other. One world, known as Brekka, is a kind of technologically humble world, is a good way to put it, I guess. They don't even really have space travel, but the Breckons provide a very powerful drug to help the Onarans, the other planet, deal with a terminal, well, rather, we don't know if it's terminal, but a disease that every Onaran suffers from. And so the crew of the Enterprise start out by investigating an interesting, some interesting solar activity in the system, which I already forgot the name of the system, the Delos system. So they explore some activity with the sun in the Delos system, and then they get a distress call from a freighter, which is going to, it's losing its stability and is going to crash into a planet. They're not able to save the freighter, but they are able to save 4 out of 6 survivors and a cargo shipment of this Felicium, which the Breckons produce for the Onarans. And the crew's just kind of baffled because the Onaran captain, played by the amazing Merritt Buttrick, is pretty inept. He doesn't know how to do much other than pilot his ship. He has no idea how to repair it. The crew offer coils, some kind of coils for their warp engine or their engines, and they wouldn't even know how to install those. And they're not very focused on technology, even though they have space flight. And then the Breckons, anyways, they save 4 out of 6 crew members, and the Onarans and the Breckons don't even seem affected by the fact that 2 crew members are lost. We find out that there's some intrigue because the shipment of Felicium is now in dispute. The Breckons claim that the Onarans had offered payment for it, but the payment must have gone down with the cargo ship. So now this Felicium is no longer available to them. Meanwhile, the Onarans are suffering from their disease, which Dr. Crusher cleverly discovers is not a disease, but in fact, the entire Onaran population is addicted to Felicium, which once did cure a disease, but is now just a narcotic that gives everyone, relief from withdrawal symptoms. when they start to come off this narcotic. And the Breckons apparently have known this the whole time, and there's like a whole bunch of cool things that happen involving the Prime Directive, and we end with Captain Picard coming up with a rather fair, if not easy, solution, and Dr. Crusher left in doubt whether or not it was the right decision made by Captain Picard. So that's the episode in a nutshell, and now we can start talking about it.
What did you think?
I really like this episode for a lot of reasons, but I think mainly I like it when Star Trek episodes are thought provoking, or any TV for that matter. And when I first saw this as a kid, it wasn't really a very standout episode for me. But now being an adult and having lived life, I've seen people go through some different kinds of addiction. And it kind of has a whole new meaning to me. Now I have a whole different view of this episode. So watching it as an adult, at various stages of adulthood, it's meant more and more. And I think this time it actually, I think it's still a very relevant episode, and it hits a lot of societal problems. Human society problems are discussed in this episode through the way that the Breckons and the Onarans, their symbiotic relationship. And one can argue, that this is a similar relationship that drug dealers have with their clients, and it's like the drug dealer knows that a certain drug might be harmful to their client, but at the same time, that's how they make their livelihood. And the Breckons know that this drug is harmful, that that it's highly addictive. It creates terrible withdrawals and puts the Onarans in a great deal of pain and discomfort. But they continue to refine this drug and make it even more potent to keep the Onarans addicted to it, so that they can provide the Breckons with all their basic needs. So it's a very interesting kind of story. And you can't help but wonder if there's a way to solve the problem in, the same problem in our life. So I think it's a great episode that brings up a lot of like touch points and topics that are very relevant still today. I also really liked it because I've always known that Merritt Buttrick, who plays David, is in this episode, but I also realized watching it this time that the Khan's right hand, this is like a Star Trek II reunion, because the Brecken character is played by Judson Scott, who played Joaquin.
I will avenge you.
Yes, exactly.
Love that line.
Yeah, so this is a Star Trek II alumni reunion, and it's a sad episode too, because we know that Merritt Buttrick died shortly after this. He died of AIDS, right?
A year later. A year after the episode aired.
Yeah, so
very sad. Yeah,
very sad. So overall I liked it. I think it was a really solid episode, a really good episode that delves into philosophy and the Prime Directive. What about you?
I think it's an okay episode. I don't think it holds up as well as you do. I think I do agree with the fact that the episode does raise themes, subject matters that is still very relevant to society today. Drug addiction being one of them, and greed, just pure greed being the other one. But I think the acting is a little hammy. Especially on the part of the I'm sorry, who are the greedy bastards?
The Breckons. Yeah, the
Breckons are a little just too obviously sleazy used car dealers. They're just like, I don't know, they just like you just know that they're the bad guys. There's no doubt in my mind from moment one. And then I thought the the Osirans. What are
The Onarans.
the Onarans? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really bad with these names. They're I thought the portrayal of their withdrawal symptoms were a little over the top, I thought. I mean, obviously, yes, withdrawal symptoms are bad, and yes, I've seen it, but still, it just went on for so long, and then it was like instantly, what do? They pinch themselves or something, and it's just like, oh, and it's like they're on Valium. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know what drug the writers were trying to parallel for sure. That's an interesting thing that maybe we could find out. But from my experience and what I've seen and read, actually it's not over the top. If many heroin addicts go through even worse withdrawal symptoms than what was even shown. And I kind of thought that the drug paralleled heroin in that it's injected and it's like super potent and like what it kind of does. And I felt like that was definitely something,
right away. They just
they're just relaxed all of a sudden. And in this like they go from being extremely agitated and in extreme discomfort, like where they think they're dying. I mean, they actually thought like they're going to die. And then the relief is just the complete opposite, which is again something that you see with heroin addicts for sure.
I liked Crusher in the episode a lot.
This was a great Crusher episode. You're right.
This was a good Crusher episode. I thought her interactions with Picard were, they kind of echoed the feisty exchanges that McCoy and Kirk would have in the original series. I think with the characters of Crusher and Picard, they're kind of they've gone different routes throughout this season that I've seen. Are they romantically interested? Are they are they going to be feisty sparring partners? Are they going to be, there's different modes with these two characters. And in this one, it was sort of like, Crusher is very adamant that we need to tell these people what's being done to them. And which is what I personally would believe in. And I side with her on this. But then you have Picard,
Doctor, the prime directive is not just a set of rules, it is a philosophy, and a very correct one. History has proven again and again that whenever mankind interferes with a less developed civilization, no matter how well-intentioned that interference may be, the results are invariably disastrous.
Yes, that's what the Time Lords of Gallifrey believe, and I, being a renegade Time Lord,
don't believe that.
I don't know about that, but so I identified with Crusher in this episode. I thought it was a good showcase for Gates McFadden and Patrick Stewart. The elevator conversation, the turbo lift,
same conversation, yeah.
But having said that, the episode just I don't know, it just didn't really click with me. The Nancy Reagan moment. Wesley turns around. Why do people use drugs? And Tasha's like, well, Wesley, it just seemed really prescribed, and it seemed like so many scenes that.
You know what? But I thought I am glad you put it in that context, though. I'm glad you took it to like a historical place and said the Nancy Reagan moment. The war on drugs is something that started with the Reagan administration, and it's one of the most expensive kinds of endeavors. And everyone thinks that like the problem is this or the problem is that, and I think that everyone's kind of missing. Tasha brings up a great point, And there's a lot of evidence now that shows that drug addiction is not so clear cut as what people think. Wesley just is baffled, and to him, I think it's great. Like, he is just like, how could anyone ever even depend on that? I mean, he brings up great points. It's like, don't they realize it's an artificially produced high? Like, the good feelings and all that. And then, you could tell Tasha's character is coming from a place where she's either been very, again, near people who are addicted to drugs, or she herself may have even had to battle with addiction in her youth on this colony, this horrifying colony that she lived on and grew up on. But I think the biggest thing that we're finding today, with like many years of research, is that the problem is not, that the drugs themselves are always, they are highly addictive, but that's not always the problem. After the Vietnam War, there was a study done because a lot of soldiers, while they were abroad, became addicted to opiates like heroin, and also when they were gonna bring these soldiers back, there was like a huge concern that we would bring home, thousands and thousands of drug addicted soldiers. And also the other worry is, like, when someone's injured and they end up in hospital and they're given opiates, there's always the fear that they'll be addicted to these opiates, after their treatment is finished. And the thing is that doesn't happen. And so what a few researchers have found is that where they did this experiment with rats, where they put rats in isolation, and in one water receptacle there was cocaine water, drug water, and in the other water receptacle there was just regular water. The rats that were just in isolation would go to the cocaine water, overdose, and die. Then they did the same experiment with Rat Park, where they created a park, so to speak, but like a community of rats, right? And they offered all the rats the same thing. And once in a while, the rats would try the cocaine water, but they would hardly drink it at all. They would drink the regular water. And it's because now they were in a community and they had other rats to socialize with and things like that. So I think the real problem is like that we do, have a big problem with isolation and isolating people. When people become homeless, we isolate them. We don't really try to rehabilitate them and welcome them back into society. We're always like kind of pushing them out of our cities and into the fringes, and like, and then they become addicted to drugs and then they die.
Right. Yeah. I would echo that. My personal experience is like working at work with the kids. I mean, I've seen kids come in high as a kite at 7 a.m, and you have to wonder why the hell are you getting high at 7 a.m? And right. what you end up seeing is a lot of these kids come from troubled homes. I mean, why do you go? Why do you need to get high at 7 a.m? Because you're. I mean, I'm talking about these kids, young kids, 14, 15. They're escaping whatever issues are in their lives, whether it's a horrible parental situation, or total lack of parental situation, or other things, abuse issues. So yeah, you're right. Obviously, people get hooked on many things because they're trying to escape. I agree with the intent of the story, which is, I mean, you've known me for many years. I'm adamantly anti drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this somehow the story just doesn't play out. It's just not that interesting. I don't know. The story seemed a little boring to me. Obvious. Going back to the Nancy Reagan moments. It just seems kind of there's really no surprises, and then the things I did have questions about were just kind of thrown aside. Like one thing we haven't talked about yet is both this planet, the not the Breckians, the other ones, the drug addict planet,
Onarans, yeah.
The Onarans have this power to the static electricity power.
They do. They both do. They're all electric eels.
Right. I mean, I thought that was really interesting, but we're kind of caught up in their drug addiction problem, and I don't know. It just, I thought the acting was a little obvious. Go ahead.
I like that over the top kind of acting, and it's kind of like what you can expect from those actors. They're not subtle actors, and as I've seen them, well, maybe Merritt Buttrick is, but the actor who plays Joaquin, he's kind of like, I kind of expected him, and in this,
he looks very different in this episode, by the way.
He actually looks, his name's Sobi, by the way, and his Sobi, Sobi, the character's name, and I thought Sobi and his counterpart, I think her name was Langor. Was it? I can't remember. Yes, it was Langor. Anyways, I thought that what I liked about them is that, like, if you think about the thing about Star Trek is that a lot of times when we're presented with these kind of planets so far in the Next Generation, and this is perhaps a critique that maybe we can, if anyone from any of the writers on the next Star Trek series are listening into this, is that, like, it seems like every planet that we visit is an extreme version of a philosophy. It's like there's like all the Onarans are addicted to this drug.
Yeah.
Like, all the Breckons are, right. And it's like we go to planets where the entire planet is a matriarchy, or, and it is cool. I get it from a story perspective. It's neat to see, hey, what it, philosophically speaking, what if a planet went in this direction and embraced this philosophy 100%, like, and things like that. But I think that, I think that on Earth we have all of these philosophies are represented here on Earth, right. In different cultures. And I get it. You have to kind of, like, you can't say, like, this is an exact parallel of, like, the Chinese civilization, or like a, Asian civilization rather, or like Russian civilization or European civilization, but you take little bits and, extremify them.
Right.
And so,
yeah.
But that being said, I think that, like, that's kind of like why the actors came, in my opinion, act the way they do. It's like, well, you're told by your director that you're from a planet where everyone's addicted to drugs, and it's the withdrawal symptoms are like coming off of heroin. So it's like, this is kind of the only way they're going to portray it. And then on the other side, you tell the Brecken actors, like, you're living on a planet that has everything you could possibly need. It's all provided on the backs of the Onaran people and their addiction. And so Brekka's kind of like a haven. It's like a, you want to talk about privilege. These people are very privileged.
Absolutely.
and have no idea. And I thought that that's why, to me, that's why the performances were great, because the two actors that played the Breckians, it seemed extremely out of touch with pain and suffering and reality, and we're very privileged, I thought. And it's even evident in the scene after the kind of argument in the cargo bay, in the sick bay, where they agree to give one dose for the two Onarans. Then the Breckian characters go back to their room, and she's like, getting a glass of wine and sitting there, and they're about to laugh about it all, like, ha 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 ha.
I know. It was just,
and I thought that was wonderful to portray them as both examples of, like, what extreme privilege can do to you, and what and how disconnected it can make you, and just, like, to show that sometimes villainy arises from the most kind of in places that are not always easy to see. You don't immediately think of the Breckons as villains, because there is a good argument to their point about, well, this is something the Onarans need and we're providing it for them. So we're just providing it in exchange for, the necessities of life, what they call the necessities of life, which we can see are the Breckians are dressed in silks and like fine clothing, and the Onarans are dressed in like farmers' rags, So it's like just all those things I thought like help to play into this kind of dynamic. And we see this in our own society where you do see like large populaces that are in servitude of some sort to a very small population of wealthy people. This is still going on in the world. And it's like, how much wealth is enough? Like, I get it, we are in a free society, but, like beyond, like, does one person need, $50 billion, at the expense of, and what is the expense? Like what,
well, that's the key thing where you're going is that,
yeah.
Yes, I'm not. I mean, I think you're saying the same thing. I'm not debating whether or not anyone has the right to be a billionaire or whatever. But when you see that others are suffering so much and all this, where is your humanity? Where is your compassion? And the people from the Trump planet were just so obviously villainous, and I don't know. I suppose you're right. I mean, I suppose the acting was bringing across the theme of the story. I don't know.
I think you
didn't do.
I think
There
you
was
hit
no
something.
B plot in this, right?
There was not really a B plot in this. I think the whole thing rode on this. There were a few things with like technological problems with the sun, like causing like all kinds of malfunctions that
At the beginning, right?
The beginning, and
but there was no like ongoing.
No, there wasn't really. It was pretty straightforward.
You think this is an episode that maybe could have?
It could have had a B plot. I think it could have
benefited from one.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I would say, yeah.
I think
the thing that wins for me in this episode is that it is thought provoking and we're having these great discussions. But you're right, we're not really like talking about the episode per se. I do think it's I do think it's funny that you said Trump planet. By the way, the opinions expressed on Starfleet Boy are solely our opinions and not the opinions of any of our sponsors, which we don't have any right now. But
I was gonna say, I'm like, oh, we have sponsors. Oh my gosh. Yeah, okay. It's just your opinion and my opinion.
It's just our opinions here, guys. Trump planet, I think you kind of, in a way, I feel, defend my point about the acting choices, is that like Donald Trump seriously doesn't seem to realize how awful he is. Like, he really does not think, I think he genuinely thinks he's on the right side of history or whatever. But looking at him, to me, he seems villainous and awful, Yeah. And I think that's what the Breckians are like. And I do hereby say that from this point on Starfleet Boy, Brekka, the planet from which these people are, is now renamed the Trump planet. In fact, one of its features is from outer space, you can see a giant T on the main continent, and it's visible. It's visible all the way from Onara. You can see the giant T all the way from Onara.
Oh gosh!
What
else I was reminded of is the who is that pharmaceutical this pharmaceutical owner who jacked up the price of some
Martin
vaccine.
Shkreli.
Right. Didn't you think of him as well when you watched this episode?
I didn't think of him, but you're absolutely right. The parallel is, that's another great parallel, is that here's someone taking advantage of something that's highly refined, very, very hard to make or whatever, and very essential to a small amount of people that can cause great suffering or death. And here it is being offered. It's been jacked up to this insane price. There are some things about Martin Shkreli that some argue he was actually, if you really looked into it, he did claim that if you contacted him or the company directly, that he would give you, if you had this condition, toxoplasmosis or whatever it was called, that he would actually give you the medicine for free. If you contacted him and you were suffering from this, what he was trying to do is charge the hospitals and the corporations that needed to buy it in bulk a price that he thought was more fair. But I don't know. I don't think that it is. At the end of the day, he's still obstructing this drug from getting into the hands of the. Not everyone's going to know to contact Martin Shkreli, and or like it's kind of like a weird thing to do is to like. There's no way he could promise that he's going to get it in the hands of everyone who needs it for free. Or I don't know. It was just a way for him to deflect the actual issue.
Right.
But yeah, he's a great example of another person who's extremely privileged and out of touch with reality because of their privilege. It's right. Like, here he is. He lives in, he apparently one of the things that he likes to show off about is that he has this one. The Wu-Tang Clan has created this album on a hard drive, and he's the only person who owns it. And he paid some great fortune for this album. It's like, why are you, why is this being flaunted? And why is that even cool?
Yeah, that's a good. It's why is this even cool? Why is this even?
Yeah, why is that even a thing that you should spend money on? You could have spent those millions of dollars maybe on building HUD homes for homeless people or something like that. But
what did you think about the actual? Because the portrayal of the drug addicted planet. I mean, you're talking about the withdrawal symptoms that people experience as they're getting off heroin, and these withdrawal symptoms, because when they initially beam aboard the Enterprise, they seemed okay, maybe a little jittery, but okay. But as the episode progressed, I mean, they just looked like they were going to die. And when Picard spoke with the the president of their planet or whatever, he also seemed really edgy. And I mean, so, the image of an entire planet, and this goes to the point that you were saying, I mean, if they had just maybe made it about one group of people on the planet or just part of a nation, but they're giving us this impression of an entire planet basically on the floor going through these traumatic withdrawal pains. I would think that if this was something, and my impression is that this probably had happened before, you would think that somehow, somewhere, somebody on the drug addicted planet would have figured out exactly what it took Crusher barely any time to figure out. And that was something that recalled an earlier episode, the one where they stole the kids. Remember that episode where those people were so ignorant of how their world worked, like they didn't know how their technology worked and all that stuff. And then here we have a planet where people, they had this disease, they used this drug, and somehow they've completely forgotten that. I mean, it seems like they've forgotten a lot in their.
Both planets, the both examples you use, I think, are excellent examples of two different things. On the Aldean homeworld, technology had become so integrated into their lives that they forgot how to. They lost touch with science and innovation because there was no need for it. All of their essential basic needs were provided for. And now this culture on Aldea chose to delve into the arts more than into science, and they lost their kind of way. So if anything broke on Aldea and the custodian couldn't fix it, they'd be screwed,
Right.
basically. On Onara, what's happened is that Felicium is it. It looks like one of the side effects of Felicium is that you just don't give a shit anymore about anything because you're just so
Right.
like
You're so
you're on
addicted to the
you're
drug.
so addicted. Well, you're just that's the only way you can find happiness, and it's such an extreme form of happiness too. It's like not so like there's not it seems like they're not motivated to do anything, any science, because all they're motivated to do is work hard enough to get um, their next batch of Felicium or their next dose.
But I mean, you would think that, I mean, if they're that, well, I mean, 2 points I want to make. One is that you would think, if I mean, if that is the case, then you would imagine somebody would say, we got to find a way to generate this drug ourselves somehow, so we don't have, so we can have more of it, so we can
The
have.
episode addresses
That
that.
would drive you, you know?
Yeah, the episode actually addresses that. So the Onarans, hundreds of years ago when this problem began, the Onarans tried to cultivate the Felicium plant on their homeworld, and it wouldn't. It can only grow in remote regions of Brecca.
Yeah, I know. But
So,
it
I mean,
seems,
they tried all these things, but it looks like what's happened is over time they've just developed this kind of like these two worlds have just kind of developed this relationship, and it's the only thing that seems to be working. And for the most part, until this one incident, it is interesting that the Enterprise comes into this story at a point where, in a way, the Enterprise kind of comes into the story and witnesses something interesting. But let's just take the Enterprise out of the equation for a moment. What was going to happen was the Onaran ship was going to crash in the atmosphere. That shipment of Felicium was not going to make it to the planet.
right.
They had no more. They had no more space capable freighters to get to Brecca, and the whole world would have gone through the withdrawal, survived it, and then whoever was left over, the process would have started to get Onaran civilization. It would have been cataclysmic in the sense that I think many people, what's not addressed in the episode is that I do think many people on Onara are going to die. There's probably going to be people.
Crusher certainly.
Yeah. Crusher was aware of it. You're right. She did kind of bring it up, but or hints at it. But you could tell that people were going to die. There's going to be a lot of suffering on Onara. But after the suffering was over, once the addiction is kicked, Crusher says in the episode they're going to be fine after that. They just need to get over it. And that's the same thing. Unfortunately, with drugs like heroin, though, if you ever relapse, you're screwed and you have to go through the whole process again. But apparently, if you can make it through a certain amount of weeks, and a lot of times some families go through extremes with their heroin addicted loved ones where they'll tie them to a bed for like several weeks, just to make sure they can actually get through the withdrawal and get the drug out of their system. And so that's going to force the Onarans. That's basically what happens. And so the only thing different that happens in this episode, because of the crew's involvement, is that they do get this one last shipment of Felicium, but Picard, I think, brilliantly decides he's like, you know what, I am bound by the Prime Directive to not disclose what the Breckons are up to, because it's their, they've developed this symbiotic sort of relationship, symbiotic or codependent, more like it, relationship over centuries, and I can't interfere, but I also can choose not to interfere by not giving them the coils. And so now they're going to be forced. The Breckons don't have the technological prowess to help them fix their ships, and the Onarans have lost the ability. That sounds like the Onarans were once a great technological civilization, and then after this plague and the societal addiction, they lost that. Achieve that, it's just going to be really hard. But one argues, well, you're going to have to pay your dues. Your whole civilization has gone down this path of like drug addiction and like complete, again, not their fault in this case, because they thought they're all ill and they thought this is medicine. But now once they get over that and they realize, oh, you know what, we're not going to die, then the whole paradigm shifts. And I thought that was another thing that's really good about this episode.
Tough love from Captain Picard.
Tough love from Captain Picard. That's right. Bavale.
Let me consult once again.
The companion.
The companion. I do want to point out that in this episode, this was actually the final episode for Denise Crosby.
Oh, they filmed.
This episode was filmed after Skin of Evil. And if for those of you with the very quick finger on the pause button, you can actually see her waving goodbye over Picard's shoulder in her after her very last scene in the cargo bay, because that was her last scene for, well, I mean, as Tasha, of course, as a regular character. We all know she returns. Yeah, so that's really the only thing of note that I could find in the companion. Obviously, we've already discussed the two actors from Star Trek 2.
I think before we do our rating for this episode, I would like to say that the ending I thought was a very sweet kind of tying up this whole like philosophical journey of this episode and the discussion about drugs. And what it really boiled down to is that both the Onarans and the Breckons had kind of lost their will to, their curiosity or their will to innovate or explore or expand their consciousness and their horizons. And so at the end, Picard's really fed up, and I don't blame him. I mean, it's a really frustrating situation where these two really kind of codependent and it does become like a little taxing on the spirit when you do have to deal with people that are so closed off and closed-minded that they can't see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
What's plain to them. So he's like, just get us out of here, take us anywhere.
That's true. Yeah, the end. Yeah. That's right. That is a nice touch at the end. You're right.
And Geordi says, all right, that's fine. And then Riker inquires, like, so where are we going? And he's like, the opera line system. And Riker says, why'd you choose that? And he's like, curiosity, never been there. Right. And I love that. And I thought that was a good end cap to the message, which is like, there's so many wonderful things to explore in the universe, and just even in our little universes, in our cities, in our towns, in our villages, if you ever do feel disconnected or lonely, or you're losing that kind of joie de vivre, just go walk outside and meet someone. I know it takes a lot for some people to do that, but like, you never know what's going to happen. And reach out. I think it's important. And also don't lose that sense of curiosity and that sense of exploration. I think humans are endowed and gifted with this it's something that I think is universal. And we have to actually condition ourselves to lose that curiosity. So try to condition yourself to keep it and keep it burning strong.
Very well said.
So shall we?
Episodes really inspire something in you, don't they?
Well, I'll agree with you that the episode was a fair episode when it comes to story and everything else. But I do think that the subject matter for me evoked a lot of thought.
I agree. there are certain topics that are difficult to make good stories out of without it being preachy. I mean, I'm really the best anti-drug story that I can think of is a very, very tough movie to watch, which is Requiem for a Dream.
God, I can't even. I've only been able to watch that movie once ever.
I knew somebody who said she liked to watch it over and over again, and I've never understood that.
I can't make it. I tried again. I was like, oh, let me, it is a great movie.
It's a phenomenal film. It's so tough to watch, but it is very honest film about drugs. Not just recreational, illegal drugs, but all drugs. Whether you're, painkillers and everything.
Coffee,
food, any addiction. Addiction. Let's just call it addiction.
Yeah.
Addiction. But yeah, I do. I have to admit, if there's anything that this our reviewing the episodes do, is that it reminds me just how much you love the show and how it just brings this philosophy out of you. That's just fun to watch, man. It really is. You really are. You get the jazz with Next Generation, man.
I really love it. Yeah.
Yeah, you love the show, and it's funny, but
so we do on Starfleet Boy, I think we do is it a 5-point scale or I don't have a database girl.
I think I always go for the 10-point, but then you always correct me. No, it's 5.
Okay, so let's do 5 points.
I give this 2. I mean, it's a fair, like you said, it's a fair episode, but it's not one that I would actively seek out. And I found nothing new in it. Like in rewatching it, I was like, yeah, I remember this episode. Yeah, okay, yeah, all right.
I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 3.
Wow.
No, it's just like I think for me, I really love exposition, and while I recognize the need for adventure and action, which we're going into, by the way, this season's going to pick up after this.
At warp speed.
At warp speed, yeah, where it's very exciting. We're gonna go to a sad episode next, but a really good one, Skin of Evil. But yeah, I think that this episode was a nice little, philosophical journey, and I say that, yeah, it's a 3. It doesn't, but I do agree with you. It doesn't stand out over time, like, as one of the greats, as one of the best episodes. And it's a shame because it did have some really nice, again, having Merritt Buttrick in it, and the actor who played Joaquin in it was nice too, to see that Star Trek alumni play a different part.
I will avenge you.
On Earth, I was a prince. There's a listener that I'd like to give a shout out to who reached out on Twitter. I'm terrible at the Twitter and the social media, so I'm sorry that I don't get back to folks. But I think she's mostly a Drunk Space Nine listener. Her name's Barbara Demarest.
Oh, that's the one didn't you sing the Beach
Barbara
Boy?
Ann? Yeah, I sang Barbara Ann.
I heard that episode.
Very cool. So Barbara, here's Starfleet Boy. Shout out to you. Thank you for listening, and thank you to everyone who watches and listens to the show. There aren't many of you, but we love you all the same. So that's about it. I think that wraps up this episode. Doctor, do you have any closing thoughts?
Let's get on to the next one.
Skin of Evil. All right. Signing out. Live long and prosper, everyone.
Warp speed ahead. Engage.